Today, we're going to dig into something pretty fundamental, how the very ground beneath our feet can actually dictate the course of a war.
You know, when you think about what wins a war, your mind probably jumps to technology, maybe great leadership, or even just sheer numbers. But what if the most overlooked force is something else entirely? A factor that commanders for centuries have ignored at their own peril.
Yeah, it's the ground itself, the terrain, the climate, the sheer physical space of the battlefield. It's not just a backdrop, it's an active player in every single fight.
All right, so let's really get into this. We're going to explore how geography isn't just, where the war happens, it's a powerful force all on its own. It can bend strategy, it can break entire armies, and sometimes it can snatch victory right from the jaws of defeat.
And there's actually a name for this: military geography. It's this simple but honestly pretty profound idea that where you fight is every bit as important as how you fight. We're talking about everything, from the slope of a tiny hill to the climate of an entire continent.
So, to see this in action, we're going to look at one of the most iconic fighting forces in all of history, the 19th century British cavalry. And trust me, they are the perfect case study for how the ground can force even the most rigid, stubborn military doctrine to either adapt or get completely wiped out. I mean, this is the image we all have in our heads, right? The glorious, thundering charge, knee to knee with sabers drawn. The British military, they were obsessed with it. This was seen as the cavalry's one true purpose, and they perfected it for big European battles. But here's the thing. The British Empire was a lot bigger than just Europe. And that's where you get this huge disconnect. You have the myth, this perfect, disciplined force ready for a grand charge. And then you have the reality, which, from India to Africa, was a series of messy, brutal, unconventional fights where that textbook charge was, well, often just suicidal, or flat out impossible.
So, how on earth did they cope? Well, let's see exactly how this all played out. We're going to look at the specific challenges in places like India and South Africa and see how they forced a total reinvention of what it even meant to be a British cavalryman.
And you know, what you're seeing here really gets at a universal truth of warfare. It doesn't matter if it's the frozen hills of Korea or the rugged terrain of India. Soldiers are constantly being thrown into environments that their training manuals just never saw coming. And that's where the real learning begins.
Okay, let's take India during the Mutiny of 1857. The battlefield was all about sieges and really broken, rugged ground. A classic knee-to-knee charge? Absolutely useless. So what do? Well, you get off your horse and you start fighting like infantry. And to deal with these scattered enemy groups, they just threw out the old rulebook and started using stealth and surprise instead. And what's so wild is who was driving this change. It wasn't the generals back in London. It was junior officers on the ground, guys who were literally planning secret raids and sneaking out of their own camps at midnight. They started using these loose, open formations that would have given a drill sergeant back home a heart attack. But this wasn't them being rogue, this was about survival. And because of it, India became, believe it or not, the center of cavalry development.
All right, now let's jump over to South Africa for the Boer War. The challenge here? Totally different. We're talking about this vast, wide-open veldt, which meant firefights were happening at insane ranges. Your saber is pretty much useless against a Boer commando with a modern rifle. And these guys were super mobile, living off the land, which forced the British troopers to get way more independent and self-reliant.
And the adaptation was swift and official. I mean, the army literally ordered most cavalry units to hand in their iconic sabers and rearm with rifles. The whole training philosophy shifted, away from the big group charge and towards individual skill. You had officers like Baden-Powell, yeah, that's the guy who founded the Boy Scouts, instituting these brutal 120-mile solo cross-country rides to teach self-reliance. All of a sudden, being a good shot was way more prestigious than being a good swordsman. But if you want to talk about extreme adaptation, we've got to go to the deserts of North Africa. This is where the terrain demanded something truly radical. They had to abandon their most essential piece of kit, the horse itself.
So here's the setup. The situation was desperate. A famous British general was besieged in Khartoum, and the only way to get to him was across this vast, unforgiving, waterless desert. Horses? No way. They just couldn't make that journey. So with their traditional cavalry, the entire rescue mission was a non-starter. Impossible.
The solution then had to be just as radical as the problem. Forget horses, they created something entirely new, the camel corpse. And get this, they assembled an all-volunteer force from the most elite horse regiments in the entire British Army. We're talking hussars, lancers, dragoons, guys who had spent their whole lives on horseback. And they were basically told, congratulations, you're now a camel expert, and you need to be good at it, like yesterday.
And this is the part that just blows my mind. They did it in 2 weeks. Just 2 weeks, that's all it took to turn these elite horsemen into a genuinely effective fighting force on camels. If you want one single story that captures our whole theme today, this is it.
So, what's the big takeaway here? What does the story of a 19th century cavalry force really tell us about warfare today? Well, it reveals a lesson that is absolutely timeless and absolutely critical.
It's really simple. Adapt or perish. The ground makes the rules. The environment, the geography, it dictates the terms of the fight. And any military force that stubbornly clings to its old rule book when the geography is changed, well, they're pretty much doomed to fail.
And look, this is not just a 19th century thing. History is absolutely packed with examples. Go way back to 451 AD. The flat plains of France made a massive, decisive battle possible, the kind that stopped Attila the Hun. You just couldn't have a battle like that in the mountains. Fast forward to World War II. The insane jungles of the Kokura Track in New Guinea forced entire armies into these grueling single-file combat lines. In every case, the terrain was calling the shot.
And that's really the ultimate takeaway, isn't it? Our technology, our weapons, they've changed in ways we can barely comprehend, from swords to satellites. But the fundamental problem? The basic challenge of moving, supplying, and fighting your way across a real, physical piece of Earth? That has remained the one constant, unchanging core of warfare.
Which kind of leaves us with one last question to chew on. In our modern age of satellites and cyber warfare, where battles can be fought from thousands of miles away through a screen, have we finally conquered geography? Or does the ground, the mud, the mountains, the deserts, does it still ultimately get the final say?